The storm swept through Windcliff rain, drowning the empty streets. Through the haze, Jeff and his daughter Lisa caught sight of a frail German shepherd, his soaked coat clinging to thin ribs, his amber eyes glowing against the night. In that instant, Lisa felt her heart tremble, as if an unspoken plea reached out through his gaze. From the moment their car stopped, a moving story began. One of loyalty, hope, and a secret waiting to be revealed. Watch the video to discover the miracle behind those eyes. The storm came down heavy on Windcliff that night. Rain swept across the harbor town in sheets blurring the glow of the old street lamps. Water coursed along the gutters, drumming against rusted tin roofs, filling the air with a restless hum. Every corner of the main road seemed painted in gray, the shops locked tight behind misted glass. Deputy Jeff steered the cruiser slowly down the empty street, wipers beating a steady rhythm. He wore his Navy patrol jacket, the fabric damp around the collar from an earlier call. At his side, the quiet weight of duty pressed like a second skin. Beside him in the passenger seat, his daughter Lisa leaned forward, eyes on the rain-streaked window. She traced a finger over the glass, following the lines where droplets slid down into the dark. Windcliff felt smaller on nights like this. The town was nothing more than a cluster of narrow roads, leaning houses, and the smell of salt carried inland from the waves. Jeff had lived here long enough to know each crack in the pavement, each flickering neon sign, each boarded storefront. The storm made them all look haunted, as if the town itself held its breath. Lisa pressed her chin into the hood of her red raincoat, her face pale in the glow from the dashboard. At 12, she carried a gaze that was often older than her years. Since her mother's passing, she had learned to fill silences with observation, watching more than she spoke. Tonight, though, her restlessness showed in the way her hands moved across the glass and her eyes darted toward every shadow. The cruiser rolled past a diner that had been closed for months. Its faded sign buzzed faintly, one last neon letter struggling against the storm. The awning sagged under the weight of rain, and puddles spread wide across the sidewalk. Lisa shifted in her seat. "Dad," she whispered, though Jeff kept his eyes on the road ahead. She pressed her forehead closer to the glass. "There." Jeff slowed out of instinct, the tires sending ripples through the water pooled at the curb. His gaze followed hers. At first, it was only a shape, a blur hunched beneath the dripping awning of the diner. Then the headlights cut across, and the outline sharpened. It was a dog. A German shepherd, or what had once been one of proud stature. Its coat was soaked to the skin, plastered in uneven patches that revealed ribs like the frame of a broken fence. The animal's posture carried both weariness and defiance, as though it had fought too long against the elements and chosen to rest here at the edge of collapse. For a brief moment, the storm seemed to quiet around them. The world narrowed to the sight of that creature curled against the wall, amber eyes lifting toward the approaching car. The look held no sound, no movement, only a steady weight that passed from glass to gaze, from animal to child. Jeff drew a breath, hand on the wheel. His thoughts flicked between procedure caution and the long night still ahead. Stray animals brought risk. Animal control was meant to handle cases like this. His house was small, his garage packed with boxes he had never unpacked. He told himself this was just another stoplight in the rain, nothing more. Yet Lisa's face had changed. The tired stillness he had grown used to since her mother's funeral broke for the first time in weeks. Her gray eyes, mirrors of his own, glistened with something sharper, an urgency, almost a plea. The rain pounded harder, tracing silver rivers down the windshield. The shepherd did not move, only blinked once, a slow, deliberate motion that seemed to ask a silent question. Jeff eased the cruiser to a full stop at the curb. His daughter leaned forward, lips parting to speak. The words had not yet left her mouth, but he already knew the tone they would carry. And in that breath, before she said it with the storm pressing close and the dog watching through the rain, Jeff felt the first pull of a choice that would change everything. "Dad, please stop." Lisa's voice cracked through the hum of rain, quiet but firm. Her hands pressed to the glass as though she could reach the figure hunched beneath the diner's awning. Jeff kept his grip steady on the wheel. The storm pressed against the cruiser in waves, urging him to move on. He opened his mouth to answer, but Lisa leaned closer, eyes wide, her tone carrying a weight he could not ignore. "He is freezing," she said. "He is alone." The dog had not shifted. Its ribs rose and fell beneath the sodden coat breath, shallow each exhale a cloud against the cold. Its ears twitched at the sound of the idling engine, but it did not retreat. Instead, it stared straight through the glass eyes locked first on Jeff, then on Lisa. Amber eyes bright against the shadows. There was defiance there, but also surrender, as though it had stood guard against storms too long. Lisa whispered again, "He is asking for help." Jeff shook his head, more to himself than to her. "It is not that simple." His voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. He thought of reports waiting at the station of long nights, with no space for more responsibility. He thought of the boxes stacked in his garage, reminders of the life he had yet to sort. A stray dog would bring trouble, disease damage, fear. Yet Lisa's hand trembled as it rested on the window. "Mom would have stopped," she said softly. The words struck like a crack of thunder in the silence of the cab. Jeff turned his eyes back to the dog. The shepherd did not cower or bare teeth. Instead, it blinked once more, a steady, deliberate motion. Rain ran down its muzzle, dripping from the ridge of a scar along one ear. The look was not a plea for food alone. It was something harder to name, as if the animal measured him and found him lacking until proven otherwise. Lisa shifted, her gray eyes wet. "We cannot leave him here. Please, Dad." Jeff let the words hang. He studied his daughter's face, the way light from the dashboard caught the curve of her cheek, the way her gaze refused to leave the animal outside. For weeks since the funeral, she had carried silence like armor. Now her voice shook with urgency, and it was directed at him. He felt the weight of his own father's lessons. Rules ordered duty before sentiment. His hand went to the radio thumb hovering above the call button for animal control. Yet when he glanced at Lisa again, he saw her lips pressed tight, her whole frame leaning forward as though her will alone could keep the dog alive. "Stay in the car," Jeff said, at last, voice clipped. He flicked the hazard lights on and pulled the door handle. Rain lashed across him the moment he stepped out, soaking his jacket, dripping into his collar. The dog lifted its head, high-arched muscles tense beneath the thin coat. Jeff raised his hands, palms open, and spoke in the calm, steady tone he used for frightened civilians. "Easy there, boy. No one will hurt you." The shepherd's gaze tracked his every step. Its tail remained tucked, but its body held steady, ears pricked forward. He knelt a few feet away, rain pooling at his boots, and extended a hand. "Come on. Let us get you dry." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the dog shifted, pressed forward on trembling legs, and closed the distance. Its nose brushed Jeff's fingers, warm breath against his skin. A flicker of trust, fragile but real. Behind him, Lisa's face pressed against the glass, a smile breaking through her fear. Jeff sighed, lowering his eyes to the animal. "All right," he muttered. "We will figure this out." He opened the rear door of the cruiser. "Hop in." The shepherd hesitated only a second before climbing onto the floorboard, water flying from its coat. Lisa whispered through the crack in her window, "See, Dad, he wants to come with us." Jeff shut the door firmly, the sound swallowed by the storm. Sliding back into the driver's seat, he kept his eyes forward, but the smell of wet fur already filled the cab, a sharp reminder of the choice made. As the cruiser pulled away from the curb, Jeff told himself this was temporary, just a stopgap until morning. Yet the glance he caught in the rearview mirror, the sight of Lisa's hand reaching slowly toward the shepherd, and the animal watching her with patient, weary eyes made him wonder if the storm had delivered more than rain that night. The cruiser rolled into Jeff's driveway long past midnight. The rain had thinned into a mist, softening the edges of the small house crouched beneath wind-bent pines. A single street lamp flickered, casting pale circles of light across the cracked pavement. Jeff cut the engine, and for a moment the silence felt heavier than the storm itself. In the back seat, the shepherd stirred, lifting its head. Lisa leaned close, her voice hushed with awe. "He stayed," she whispered, as if afraid the dog might vanish if she spoke too loud. Jeff opened the door and stepped out, boots sinking into puddles. He pulled the rear handle, letting the shepherd climb down. The animal's paws landed with a soft splash. Its legs trembled, but it stood steady, nose lifted to take in the new place. Jeff guided both child and dog toward the detached garage. The structure was nothing more than cinder block walls and a rusting tin roof. Inside it smelled of oil wood and damp cardboard. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swaying gently in the draft. Jeff cleared a corner near the small space heater he kept for cold nights. He pulled an old blanket from a box, spreading it across the floor. "This will have to do," he muttered. Lisa shrugged out of her raincoat and knelt at once beside the shepherd. "Here, boy," she murmured, patting the blanket. The dog lowered himself, circling once before settling, ribs rising and falling with heavy breaths. Steam lifted faintly from his coat as the heater began to work against the damp. Jeff fetched a towel and handed it to Lisa. "Slow, gentle," he said. She nodded, her small hands careful as she rubbed the dog's back, speaking soft nonsense words. Each stroke loosened clumps of water until the fur began to fluff. The shepherd let out a long sigh, a sound halfway between fatigue and relief. For the first time in months, Jeff watched his daughter smile without effort. She laughed quietly when the dog shifted closer, pressing his nose against her knee. Her voice was bright in a way he had almost forgotten. "He likes me, Dad." Jeff leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. The sight warmed him more than the heater did, yet it carried an ache. His wife had always been the one to coax laughter out of Lisa, to fill their home with light, even on dark days. Since her passing, the house had grown quieter, the girl retreating into silences Jeff could not always reach. Now a stray dog had undone what he could not. He bent to check the animal, scanning for tags, collar, anything that might name him. There was nothing, only scars. Thin lines across the ear patches of rough skin along the flank. Signs of a past life that had not been kind. Lisa glanced up. "We should call him something." Her voice was shy but hopeful. Jeff hesitated, words forming on his tongue and falling away. Naming meant permanence. Permanence meant another weight to carry. He rubbed his jaw and said nothing. Lisa lowered her gaze, continuing to dry the dog's fur. The shepherd's amber eyes lifted, catching Jeff's in the dim light. They held steady, not pleading, not yielding, as if daring him to turn away. Jeff looked back until he had to drop his eyes. "Get some sleep," he said at last, pulling a blanket from another box and handing it to his daughter. "You can stay here with him for a while." Lisa curled beside the dog, her small frame leaning against his warmth. The shepherd shifted just enough to shelter her head, resting on his paws, eyes still watchful. Jeff stood in the doorway, the rain ticking against the tin roof, memories of his wife pressing in with the sound. He thought of her laugh, of the way she once said kindness could grow roots even in the hardest soil. He shut off the light, leaving only the glow of the heater. Behind him, his daughter's breathing slowed, the shepherd's steady presence anchoring her in the dark. Morning came slow to Windcliff. The storm had broken into a thin drizzle, leaving the sky pale and streets washed clean. In the garage, the air was warmer than the night before, carrying the faint smell of heater coils and damp fur. Lisa stirred first, lifting her head from the blanket. Her cheek was pressed against the shepherd's side, his steady breathing keeping her through the night. She rubbed her eyes. and then froze, realizing he was still there. The dog lifted his head at the movement ears, twitching amber eyes locking on hers. For a moment, neither moved. Then Lisa reached a careful hand toward him. The shepherd did not flinch. He leaned forward instead, brushing his nose against her wrist, a small gesture of trust earned overnight. Lisa's smile bloomed quiet but bright. She whispered, "Good morning, Liam." The name slipped out as though it had been waiting all along. The dog blinked, then laid his chin back on his paws, content. Lisa laughed softly, her fingers moving through his damp fur. "Liam," she said again, firmer now, as if sealing it. Jeff stood at the doorway, coffee steaming in his hand. He had expected hesitation, maybe even fear. Instead, what he saw was a bond forming in real time. His daughter, who had gone silent after her mother's passing, now spoke freely to an animal they had met only hours earlier. Her voice carried warmth he had not heard in months. He sipped his coffee and studied them. Lisa leaned close, whispering nonsense into Liam's ear, and the shepherd's tail brushed faintly against the floor in response. Trust was blooming faster than Jeff believed possible. He thought of his wife, of how she had once told him that Lisa's heart was too open for this world. He had worried about that openness, about how easily it could break. Now he watched the girl stroke a battered dog, as if mending both their wounds with her touch. Jeff set the mug on the workbench and stepped closer. Liam's eyes flicked to him, body tensing for a beat, but Lisa's calm hand steadied him. "It's all right," she told the dog softly. "He is with us." The word struck Jeff. He crouched down not too close, resting his elbows on his knees. Liam did not retreat. The shepherd's gaze stayed steady, guarded, but no longer defiant. "Liam, huh?" Jeff said, testing the name. The dog's ears twitched as if recognizing the sound. Lisa nodded eagerly. "Yes, that is his name." Jeff let the silence linger. He did not want to admit that the name felt right, that it anchored the animal in a way he had resisted the night before. Still seeing his daughter's face light up, he gave a small nod. "All right, Liam it is." Lisa grinned, her eyes brighter than he had seen in months. She bent to hug the dog, who shifted to press closer against her side. Jeff stood again, brushing dust from his jacket. Something had shifted, not just between the girl and the dog, but inside the house he had thought would never feel alive again. A hint of warmth had slipped in, soft as dawn. Yet duty never strayed far. His radio crackled faintly from the cruiser parked outside static, carrying the dispatcher's clipped voice. Jeff glanced at it through the open garage door, his shoulders tightening. Another call was coming, and the world beyond these walls waited with its usual weight. He looked once more at Lisa and Liam, the two of them curled together, like they had always belonged. For a fleeting moment, he let the sight sink in. Then he reached for the radio, lifting it to his ear. Jeff raised the radio to his ear, listening through the crackle of static. The dispatcher's voice cut through, steady but urgent. "Unit 3 report to the harbor. Ongoing investigation. Missing juvenile. Name Alyssa Grant, 17 years old. Last seen near the docks 2 nights ago. Family waiting for updates." He pressed the button to confirm, his eyes flicking toward the garage. Lisa still knelt beside Liam, whispering to him, as if the two had shared a lifetime instead of one night. Jeff's jaw tightened. A missing girl. A family waiting. Another weight he could not set down. He returned the radio to his belt and stepped closer. "I have to check something in town," he said. "Stay here, Lisa. Keep the heater running. I will not be gone long." Lisa looked up, her hand resting on Liam's neck. "Can he come with you?" she asked quickly. Jeff shook his head. "This is police work. He stays." But even as he said it, the shepherd's ears flicked as if he understood. The dog rose from his blanket tail, low eyes steady on Jeff. "I mean it," Jeff added, pointing toward the floor. "Stay." He left before the doubt could sink in, striding into the drizzle toward his cruiser. The harbor was quiet when he arrived, the storm's edge still brushing the water in pale sheets. Boats rocked against their lines, ropes creaking. The scent of salt and diesel filled the air. Near the end of the dock, a small cluster of officers stood under slickers, their flashlights sweeping across the weathered boards. Jeff joined them, the dispatcher's notes echoing in his head. Alyssa, 17, a yellow scarf, last seen heading toward the pier. He adjusted his jacket and crouched near the rail. The rain had dampened everything, smearing evidence into water and wood. Still, his eyes caught a glint of color tucked near a piling. He reached down, pulling free a strip of fabric tangled in a nail. A scarf yellow once, now dulled by rain and streaked with dirt. Before he could bag it, a sharp bark split the air. Jeff turned fast. He had left the garage closed, the door latched, yet somehow Liam stood at the edge of the dock. The shepherd's coat was still damp from the night before, his eyes fixed on the scarf in Jeff's hand. Liam, Jeff muttered half in disbelief. The dog trotted closer, nose working furiously. When Jeff lowered the scarf, Liam lunged forward, nostrils flaring as he pressed his muzzle into the fabric. His entire body stiffened, tail straight, ears locked forward. Then came another bark, sharper, insistent, echoing across the quiet harbor. Officers turned, startled. Jeff held the scarf higher, staring at the dog's reaction. Liam pawed the boards, whining low, pacing in tight circles before snapping his head toward the far end of the dock. His whole frame trembled, urgency rolling off him like the storm. Jeff's throat went dry. This was no random curiosity. The shepherd knew something or remembered something. The scarf had sparked recognition. Lisa's voice echoed in his memory from hours earlier. Mom would have stopped. He swallowed hard, torn between protocol and instinct. His superiors would say to keep the dog clear, to leave matters to trained officers. Yet Liam stood braced at the rail, amber eyes fierce in the drizzle, as if demanding to be heard. Jeff slipped the scarf into an evidence bag, sealing it tight. His gaze followed Liam's out over the gray water and the slick boards that stretched into shadow. The case was no longer just a name on the radio. It was alive in the trembling urgency of a scarred shepherd who had already crossed one storm to reach them. Jeff squared his shoulders. "All right," he whispered to himself, though Liam's ears twitched as if the words were meant for him. The rain thickened again, mist curling low across the harbor as Jeff stood with the evidence bag. Liam's bark still echoed in his ears, sharp and alive with urgency. Jeff handed the scarf to another officer and turned back toward the cruiser. Duty pressed heavy, yet a strange current of trust had begun to stir in him. He thought of Lisa waiting at home. The garage heater, the quiet bond forming between her and the dog. He pictured her curled against Liam's side, safe. That thought steadied him as he stepped toward the pier. But Lisa was not in the garage. Drawn by curiosity and fear of being left behind, she had followed her father at a distance. Wrapped in her red raincoat, hood pulled tight, she trailed along the shadowed street until the sound of voices guided her to the dock. She saw her father with other officers, saw the scarf, saw Liam's fierce reaction. Her chest tightened with both awe and a strange pride. She edged closer, careful not to be seen. The boards were slick beneath her shoes, rain dripping into black water below. She leaned against the rail, craning her neck for a better view. Her hand slipped on the wet wood, and in a blink her foot slid across the narrow plank. Her cry tore through the mist. "Dad!" Jeff spun, his heart seizing. Lisa flailed near the edge, one sneaker dangling over the dark water. Before he could move, Liam lunged. The shepherd bounded across the dock, claws, scraping wood body, slamming against the girl's side. Lisa toppled backward, not into the sea, but into the rough warmth of the dog's flank. She clutched his fur with both hands, gasping. Jeff rushed forward, hauling his daughter into his arms. She was trembling, her face pale beneath the dripping hood. He held her close, breath heavy. "What were you thinking?" His voice cracked, anger and fear tangled tight. Lisa pressed her face into his chest, whispering, "I just wanted to see." Her words came out broken, threaded with sobs. Beside them, Liam stood braced, body tense, ears flat, as if still shielding the girl from the abyss. His amber eyes flicked between father and daughter, alert, refusing to stand down. Jeff's grip on Lisa softened. He looked at the dog, really looked, and for the first time saw more than a stray. Liam had not hesitated. He had chosen. He had saved what mattered most. The officers nearby watched in silence, the scene heavier than words. Jeff met their eyes, then looked back at Liam. Rain plastered the dog's fur scars visible under the thin coat. Yet his stance carried strength, his gaze unwavering. Jeff swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Good boy," he murmured, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Lisa turned her head, her small hands still tangled in Liam's coat. "He saved me, Dad." Her voice was hushed but sure, carrying a certainty that pierced through Jeff's doubt. Jeff let out a long breath, pulling his daughter closer under his arm. His eyes lingered on the dog, who finally lowered his head tail, giving the faintest sweep along the wet boards. A bond had been forged in that instant, undeniable. The harbor stretched silent around them, only the rain and the groan of ropes breaking the stillness. Jeff knew the case was far from over. Yet his gaze kept returning to Liam. Each scar marked a history untold, but tonight one truth stood clear. This dog was more than chance. Jeff steadied Lisa on her feet and guided her back toward the cruiser, Liam falling into step beside them. The case waited. The rain pressed on, and somewhere in the scars of a weary shepherd lay answers Jeff was not yet ready to face. The ride back from the harbor was quiet. Rain tapped on the cruiser's roof, a softer rhythm than before, almost thoughtful. Lisa sat beside Jeff in the front seat, her hood pushed back, cheeks pale but steady. In the back, Liam lay curled on the mat, his chest rising and falling with measured breaths. Jeff's eyes flicked to the mirror more than once. The shepherd's amber gaze lingered on him, calm but alert, as if still standing guard even in rest. He could not shake the image of Liam slamming against Lisa, pulling her from the edge of the dock. That kind of action did not come from luck. It came from training, from instinct, shaped by long practice. When they reached the house, Jeff guided Lisa inside, wrapped her in a blanket, and set a mug of cocoa in her hands. She leaned against the couch, still murmuring about Liam. He knew what to do, Dad, like he had done it before. Jeff studied her, then stepped into the garage where Liam had settled on the old blanket near the heater. The dog shifted, ears flicking as Jeff crouched beside him. In the dim light, the scars stood out more clearly. Thin, pale lines ran along Liam's flank. One ear carried a notch, healed but sharp. Across his shoulder, a faded mark hinted at a wound once deep. Jeff reached out slowly, palm open. Liam sniffed his hand, then allowed the touch. His fur was coarse along the scarred places, softer elsewhere. Jeff traced the lines with his eyes, his thoughts tightening. These were not the marks of street fights or simple neglect. They looked precise, the kind of injuries a working dog might carry from years of service. "Where did you come from?" Jeff murmured. The shepherd's ears turned at his voice as if listening. Lisa appeared in the doorway, still holding her mug. "What are you looking at?" Jeff motioned her closer. "These scars, they are old, healed in ways that mean care was given at some point. He was trained, maybe even part of a unit. Police, military, something like that." Lisa's eyes widened. She knelt beside Liam, stroking his back. "That means he belonged to someone," maybe Jeff said. His voice was low, steady, but a thought burned in him. If Liam had once been trained, then his presence at the diner was not random. And his reaction to the scarf at the harbor, so sharp, so immediate, could not be coincidence. Lisa leaned her cheek against the shepherd's side. "Do you think he knew the girl Alyssa?" Jeff did not answer at once. He stared at Liam, the dog's eyes steady scars glowing faintly in the heater's light. It is possible, he admitted finally. Or he was used by someone who did. Silence stretched. The dog shifted, pressing closer to the girl, tail brushing once against the floor. Jeff watched the weight of questions settling heavy on his shoulders. He had spent years piecing together cases with fragments smaller than this. And now, in the shape of a scarred shepherd, a new lead might have walked straight into his life. He stood, rubbing a hand over his tired face. The case was changing. It was no longer just about a missing girl. It was about the past written across the hide of a weary animal. Jeff's radio crackled again, breaking the silence. A clipped message came through. Activity near the old cold storage warehouse on the edge of town. Suspicious movement. Possible connection to the missing girl. Jeff looked down at Liam, whose ears had already pricked at the sound, body tense as if ready. Lisa whispered, "He wants to go." Jeff exhaled, the decision rising like the storm outside. Then we follow where he leads. The night air carried the bite of salt and rust as Jeff drove toward the edge of Windcliff. The roads grew narrower, lined with warehouses long forgotten by the town's bustle. Street lamps flickered weakly, their halos stretched thin through the mist. In the passenger seat, Lisa sat silent, her gaze steady on the windshield. She had refused to stay behind her hands, clutching the straps of her coat as though anchoring herself to the moment. In the back, Liam stood braced, head near the glass ears, turning at every shift of sound outside. When they reached the old cold storage warehouse, Jeff cut the engine. The building loomed against the storm, its corrugated walls streaked with years of salt spray. Windows high above were dark, one broken panel tapping in the wind like a loose shutter. Jeff stepped out firsthand, brushing the holster at his side, but his eyes stayed on Liam. The dog leapt down, nose to the ground, body taut with energy. His paws carried him to a side door chained shut with a rusted lock. Jeff tested it once, then sighed, pulling a cutter from the trunk. The lock snapped with a brittle crack, the sound too loud in the quiet street. "Stay close," he told Lisa, his voice firm. She nodded, her eyes wide but steady. Inside, the air was colder than outside, thick with the smell of damp wood and rotting rope. The beam of Jeff's flashlight swept across the cavernous space, rows of broken pallets, coils of discarded netting, and dark puddles shimmering on cracked concrete. Every sound echoed each step, carrying twice as far. Liam moved ahead, nose low, tracing invisible lines across the floor. His tail lifted, then stiffened. Jeff followed, heart-thudding, Lisa a step behind him. The dog led them past a row of collapsed crates to a corner near a rusted loading door. There, beneath a sagging tarp, lay a small collection of discarded items. Beer cans, cigarette butts, a damp mattress flattened against the wall. A makeshift camp. Jeff crouched, lifting the tarp with his gloved hand. The smell of mildew and sweat hit him at once. Someone had stayed here, and not long ago. Lisa pressed closer, her voice a whisper. "Do you think she was here?" Jeff swept his light across the mattress, then toward the floor. Small footprints, faint but visible in the dust, led away toward the far side of the warehouse. They were too slight to belong to a grown man. His chest tightened. Liam sniffed the mattress, then pawed at it, circling once before pressing his nose into the fabric. A low sound rumbled in his throat. Not threat, but recognition. He looked back at Jeff Amber, eyes glowing in the flashlight's arc. Jeff's throat went dry. The scarf, the footprints, the dog's reaction, all threads weaving into something more than chance. He rose, scanning the room again. The silence pressed closer now, heavier than the storm outside. "She was here," he said quietly, not needing to raise his voice. She was here. Liam barked once sharp, then darted toward another pile of debris near the wall. His paws scratched against the boards until something small shifted free. Jeff moved quickly, kneeling as Liam nudged at the object with his nose. It was another piece of fabric darker than the scarf, but tangled in grime. He could not yet tell what it was, but his pulse quickened. Lisa clutched his arm. "Dad?" Jeff met her eyes, then glanced back at the dog who stood stiff, waiting. "Stay behind me," he said, pulling the fabric free. The night had opened another path, and Liam was already leading the way. Jeff held the piece of fabric up to the beam of his flashlight. The cloth was once bright, but now dulled by grime, its edges frayed from wear. As he turned it over, his stomach tightened. Dark stains clung stubbornly to the threads, deep brown against yellow. It was a scarf. No mistaking it. Lisa gasped, her small hand gripping his sleeve. "Is that hers?" Jeff swallowed, forcing his voice steady. "It matches the description. Alyssa's family said she wore a yellow scarf the night she disappeared." The words felt heavy, hanging in the stale air. He slid the scarf into an evidence bag, sealing it with deliberate care. His training demanded precision, but beneath it his chest burned with unease. A missing girl's scarf stained in a way no storm could explain. Beside him, Liam pawed the floor, circling as if restless. He pressed his nose against the evidence bag, then drew back with a low huffed tail, stiff ears pointed toward the far side of the warehouse. His body language carried a clear message: the trail did not end here. Jeff looked down at him, unsettled by the certainty in the dog's stance. This was no stray stumbling into luck. Liam moved with purpose, each motion sharp, directed, as though following a memory only he could read. Lisa crouched beside the shepherd, brushing her hand through his damp coat. "He knows her, Dad," she whispered. "I can feel it." Jeff didn't answer. His mind ran through possibilities. If Liam had been a working dog, if he had once belonged to law enforcement or security, then perhaps he had been tied to this case before Alyssa vanished. Or perhaps worse, someone had used him, left him behind when his role was finished. He exhaled slowly, forcing his thoughts back to the present. The scarf was proof. It confirmed Alyssa had been here. He needed to move carefully, file the report, mark the location. But a part of him, the part that kept glancing at Liam, urged him to trust more than procedure. The storm outside had eased to a drizzle, but inside the warehouse, the silence pressed like a weight. Lisa shivered, pulling her coat tighter. Jeff placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her a step back. "We're leaving," he said. "This is enough for tonight. We have evidence. That's what matters." Still, his eyes lingered on the far end of the warehouse where Liam stood, fixed, nose lifted, body tense. The shepherd's tail flicked once, slow and deliberate. His message was clear: the girl's story had not ended with the scarf. Jeff clipped the leash to Liam's collar, steadying his voice. "We'll come back," he murmured, almost as if promising the dog as much as himself. Lisa glanced at the evidence bag in her father's grip, then at Liam, who pressed forward as though unwilling to leave. Her voice trembled with both fear and hope. "Do you think she's still alive?" Jeff didn't answer. The question cut too close, and he had seen too many cases end with silence. Yet as he looked at Liam, scarred, steady, unwavering, he felt the first stirrings of belief, fragile but real. They stepped back into the wet night. The air smelled of brine and rust, the fog rolling low across the harbor's edge. Jeff guided Lisa toward the cruiser, Liam pacing beside them, ears turning with each sound in the dark. Jeff locked the evidence bag in the case box, his jaw set. The scarf was important, but what unsettled him more was the way the dog had found it. Unerring, certain, as though the threads of Alyssa's fate were woven into his very memory. As Jeff slid into the driver's seat, he scanned the mirrors out of habit. For a heartbeat, He thought he saw movement along the edge of the lot, a shape slipping back into the fog. He blinked, but it was gone. Liam's ears twitched, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Jeff gripped the wheel tighter. The case was no longer silent. Someone, or something, was watching. The drive back to town was tense, the cruiser's headlights slicing through fog that curled like smoke over the road. Jeff kept one hand tight on the wheel, the other brushing the radio at his side. Lisa sat quiet, hugging her knees, while in the back, Liam stayed upright, body-stiff, ears turning with every whisper of sound beyond the glass. The dog's earlier growl echoed in Jeff's thoughts. He replayed the shape he thought he saw, just a blur in the mist near the warehouse lot. His instincts told him it hadn't been imagination. Someone had been there watching. By the time they reached the first stretch of Main Street, Jeff's suspicions sharpened. In the mirror, two headlights glowed a steady distance behind them. At first he told himself it was nothing. But each turn he made, the lights followed. Too far for coincidence, too close for comfort. Lisa noticed it too. "Dad," she whispered, glancing at the rear window. "That car hasn't left us." Jeff kept his voice calm. "Sit back, Lisa." He slowed slightly, then turned onto a narrower side street. The car behind matched the move. In the back, Liam gave a sharp bark, nails clicking against the floorboard as his body shifted with tension. Jeff guided the cruiser toward the edge of town, where the road narrowed near the boatyards. He pulled into a gravel lot, headlights sweeping over abandoned nets and rusting anchors. He cut the engine. The following car slowed, idled at the far end of the street, then rolled closer. Jeff stepped out, rain misting against his face, his badge glinting faintly under the street lamp. His voice cut steady across the lot. "Police, step out of the vehicle." For a moment, silence. Then the driver's door creaked open. A man emerged, tall and lean, beneath a dark hooded jacket. His hands stayed shoved deep in his pockets. He did not speak. He only stared. Liam leapt down from the cruiser before Jeff could stop him. Stance braced a low rumble in his throat. The man's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Jeff. He took one step closer. Jeff's hand hovered near his holster. "Identify yourself." Still no answer. Just that steady, unblinking stare. Then the man turned quick as a shadow, bolting back toward his car. "Stay!" Jeff shouted, sprinting forward. Liam lunged beside him, his paws kicking gravel into the dark. The hooded figure reached his car, yanking the door, but the shepherd was faster. Liam slammed against him, teeth bared, knocking the man sideways. Jeff closed the distance, pinning the suspect against the hood. "Hands where I can see them." The man hissed through clenched teeth, his breath sharp with alcohol and smoke. "You shouldn't be here." Jeff pressed him harder, eyes narrowing. "What do you know about Alyssa Grant?" But before the man could answer, a second set of headlights flared down the street. The suspect twisted, using the moment's distraction to shove Jeff off balance. He tore free, slipping into the car as the engine roared. Tires screeched on wet pavement, spitting gravel as both vehicles vanished into the fog. Jeff stood still, chest-heaving rain pattering against his jacket. Liam circled back to his side, tail-stiff ears trained on the empty road. The dog's growl lingered low and unsettled. Lisa pushed open the cruiser's door, her voice trembling. "Dad, who was that?" Jeff holstered his weapon, scanning the mist. "Someone who didn't want us near that warehouse." His tone carried both anger and certainty. He looked at Liam, who stood tall despite his soaked coat, his amber eyes locked on the dark horizon. The dog had faced down the man without hesitation. That image seared into Jeff's mind, heavier than any case file. But with the danger came another weight. His radio buzzed with static, the dispatcher's voice crisp. "Deputy, report when you can. And remember protocol. Animal control still expects that stray in by morning." Jeff's grip tightened around the radio. He glanced at Liam, then at Lisa, who clutched the doorframe, eyes fierce. The order pressed against his chest, but so did the memory of Liam's teeth flashing in defense, the growl that had shielded them both. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm rising inside his mind. The cruiser rolled back into Jeff's driveway just before dawn, headlights carving thin beams through the drizzle. The world looked washed out, colorless, as though the night itself had drained the town. Lisa leaned against the window, eyes heavy with fatigue. In the back, Liam stayed alert, ears pricked even as his body sagged with exhaustion. Jeff cut the engine, but he didn't move. His hand hovered over the radio, clipped to his jacket. The dispatcher's order replayed in his head like a drumbeat. Animal control still expects that stray in by morning. Stray. The word burned. He glanced back at Liam, who met his gaze with steady, amber eyes. This was no stray. He had stood between Lisa and the sea, faced down a man in the dark, and found evidence no officer had uncovered. Jeff's pulse thudded harder, anger coiling low in his chest. Lisa stirred. "Dad, Bess." Jeff stepped out, rain misting his hair, and opened her door. She slid out, tugging her coat close. Liam followed, shaking droplets from his coat. Jeff led them into the garage, closing the door behind them. The small heater hummed faintly, throwing circles of light across the concrete. Lisa crouched beside Liam, rubbing his damp fur dry with an old towel. "They can't take him away," she said suddenly, her voice tight. Jeff paused mid-step. "Lisa, it's not that simple. There are rules. Procedures." Her head snapped up. "Rules?" Her gray eyes flashed fierce through her exhaustion. "He saved me, Dad. Twice. He found the scarf. He's part of this. You saw it." Jeff clenched his jaw. He wanted to agree to let her words stand as truth. But the weight of his badge pressed against him, heavy with expectation. "If I disobey an order, I risk everything. My job, the case, even custody of him. They'll call me reckless." Lisa rose to her feet, her fists balled. "And if you follow the order, what then? He gets locked in some shelter cage while that girl is still out there, while the man who tried to hurt us walks free." Her words struck deeper than he expected. He turned away, pacing the narrow garage. His anger had nowhere to go. Anger at the faceless man in the hood, at the system that reduced a dog like Liam to a file at himself for hesitating. Behind him, Liam let out a low whine, padding closer until his body brushed against Jeff's leg. Jeff froze, staring down at the scars etched into the shepherd's coat. Every mark spoke of battles fought and survived. The dog had endured worse than bureaucratic rules. Lisa's voice softened, but carried steady conviction. "Mom would have kept him. You know she would have." Jeff closed his eyes. The memory of his wife's laugh, her quiet belief that kindness could change the course of a life, flooded back. His chest ached with it. When he opened his eyes, Lisa was staring at him. Her chin lifted, her hand resting protectively on Liam's neck. For the first time in months, Jeff saw not just grief in his daughter, but resolve. He exhaled hard, pressing his palms against his face. "I'll stall," he said at last. "I'll file the report late, say the dog's being evaluated. But Lisa, this puts us all in the spotlight. If anyone finds out..." "We won't let them," she cut in quickly. "We'll prove he belongs with us. With you." Jeff looked at her, then at Liam. The shepherd sat tall, amber eyes steady, as though already claiming the place. The radio crackled again, breaking the moment. A voice sharp through static. "Deputy Turner, possible suspect sighted. Cold storage warehouse. All units respond." Jeff's blood surged. He met Liam's gaze, saw the dog rise to his feet, ears alert, body taut with readiness. Lisa clutched Jeff's arm, whispering, "He wants to lead." And in the storm pressing outside, Jeff felt the choice sharpening again. Windcliff was drowning in storm. Rain lashed sideways across the windshield as Jeff steered the cruiser toward the edge of town. Lightning cracked above the shoreline, turning the sea into flashes of white and steel. The radio kept hissing updates, clipped words about movement at the cold storage warehouse. A suspect cited no confirmation approach with caution. Lisa sat in the front seat, knuckles white around her seatbelt. "Dad, it's the same place," she whispered. "Where we found the scarf." Jeff nodded, jaw set. His thoughts spun between the scarf sealed in evidence and the shadow that had slipped away hours before. The pieces were circling back to this warehouse. He tightened his grip on the wheel. In the back, Liam stood braced despite the sway of the vehicle. Rain streaked his coat, his ears pricked forward as if already locked on some invisible trail. The moment Jeff pulled into the gravel lot, the shepherd leapt down before the engine cut paws splashing through puddles. He didn't hesitate, nose to the ground, body taut with urgency. "Dad," Lisa said quickly, eyes following the dog. "He knows something." Jeff opened his mouth to argue, but the words faltered. Liam was already pulling toward the far side of the building, ignoring the main loading dock, where officers were gathering under floodlights. Instead, he veered along the fence line toward shadows, where the storm pressed hardest. Jeff caught up rain soaking through his jacket. "Liam," he muttered, but the dog pressed on tail, stiff nose working with sharp precision. Lisa clung to Jeff's arm, forcing him to keep pace. "Trust him," she urged, her voice almost lost in the roar of rain. The warehouse loomed a rusted giant against the storm. Lightning lit its walls in stuttering bursts. Liam halted near a stack of shipping containers pressed close to one side. He circled once, then pawed at a patch of ground where weeds bent low in the wind. Jeff crouched, brushing water from his eyes. At first he saw only broken concrete and rusted hinges. Then his beam caught a seam, a thin outline of a door half hidden by debris. The lock had been snapped fresh metal, gleaming through the rust. Jeff's chest tightened. This wasn't on the building's blueprints. "A hidden entrance," he muttered. Liam barked once sharp, then pressed his nose against the gap, pushing. The door creaked open under the storm's howl, revealing a narrow stairwell sinking into darkness. Jeff shined his light down. Damp steps, slick with algae, descended into the bowels of the warehouse. The air rising out carried the rank stench of mildew and something sharper. Fear. Lisa gasped softly. "Dad." Jeff steadied her shoulder. "Stay close. Do not let go of me." He unclipped the leash. Liam surged forward, descending the steps with surety, his body low, every motion speaking of training long buried, but not forgotten. Jeff followed, one hand on the rail, the other steady on his flashlight. Lisa's breath trembled behind him, but she didn't falter. The stairwell opened into a dim corridor lined with pipes that dripped steadily, water echoing in the silence. Liam moved ahead, pausing at each corner, ears twitching, body coiled. At one point, he stopped dead, muzzle lifting toward a door at the end of the hall. He growled low and deliberate. Jeff tightened his grip on his weapon. Beyond that door, the storm's rage felt muffled, replaced by a silence heavy with presence. He knew in his bones they weren't alone. Lightning flashed through a broken vent, spilling jagged light into the hall. For an instant, Jeff saw the glint of movement, a shadow slipping just beyond the doorframe. He exchanged a look with Liam, whose stance had shifted into readiness, every muscle taut. Jeff whispered, barely audible, "All right, partner. Lead the way." Jeff's hand pushed the door open, inch by inch. The hinges groaned, swallowed by the storm's howl, bleeding through cracks in the warehouse walls. The room beyond was cavernous. Rows of crates stacked like crooked teeth, shadows, crawling with every flash of lightning. Liam slipped inside, first his paws silent against the wet concrete. Jeff followed Lisa, clinging close behind him. The beam of his flashlight cut across the gloom and froze on movement. A man stood near the center of the space, his hood dripping rainwater, his posture sharp with tension. In one hand, he gripped a knife, the blade catching brief sparks of light. "Sheriff's Department." Jeff called, his voice echoing off the walls. "Drop the weapon." The man didn't move. His face was hidden beneath the hood, but his shoulders rose and fell with ragged breaths. Another flash of lightning lit the warehouse, and in that instant, the man bolted, feet splashing through puddles. "Stay here," Jeff barked to Lisa, then gave chase. Liam shot forward ahead of him, a dark streak across the wet floor. The suspect spun suddenly, swinging the knife in a wide arc. Jeff stumbled back, heart slamming against his ribs. The blade whistled close. Too close. Liam lunged. His body hit the man with the force of a hammer, knocking him sideways into a stack of crates. The knife clattered to the floor, skidding across the wet concrete. The man roared, struggling, his arm pinned beneath the shepherd's weight. "Hold!" Jeff shouted, moving in fast. His boot kicked the knife away, sending it spinning into the dark. He pressed his gun forward, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "Don't move." The man thrashed, but Liam growled low. His jaws clamped just tight enough on the man's sleeve to warn. The growl reverberated through the storm-filled silence, a sound that froze the suspect more than any command could. Jeff pressed down harder, cuffing the man with swift, practiced motions. Lightning split the sky outside the rain, thrashing harder against the metal roof. Every sound felt magnified. The storm, the ragged breathing, the shepherd's unrelenting growl. Lisa crept closer, her face pale but eyes locked on Liam. "Dad," she whispered, "he saved you." Jeff's hands tightened on the cuffs, the truth of her words sinking deep. A second slower and the blade might have found him. But Liam had chosen. Again. His scars spoke of a past built on training, yet in this moment his choice was no command. It was loyalty. Jeff hauled the man upright, pressing him against the wall. The suspect's hood slipped back, revealing hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, and a twisted sneer. "You've got nothing," he spat. Rain streamed down his face, mixing with sweat. "You can't prove." Jeff shoved him harder against the concrete. "We'll see about that." His voice was low, controlled, but fire burned behind his eyes. Beside him, Liam finally released the man's sleeve, stepping back only enough to stand guard, muscles taut, eyes locked on the suspect like an unblinking sentinel. Jeff forced the cuffs tighter, ignoring the man's hiss of pain. His gaze shifted to the scattered crates, to the shadows that might still hold answers. The storm raged, but inside the warehouse, another storm gathered. Truth pressing close, ready to break. He looked at Liam, the dog's amber eyes glowing in the flashlight's beam. "Good boy," Jeff said quietly. Not as command, not as habit, but as truth. Lisa's voice cut the silence, soft yet steady. "He's not just helping us, Dad. He's part of this." Jeff gave a single nod, the weight of it heavy in his chest. Somewhere in this room, beyond the cuffs and the storm, more waited to be found. The suspect slumped against the wall, cuffs biting his wrists, eyes darting like a cornered rat. Jeff kept one hand firm on his shoulder while his flashlight swept across the crates piled behind him. The storm outside hammered the roof, each strike of rain rattling the silence. Liam moved first. The shepherd padded toward a canvas duffel bag, tossed carelessly near the base of the crates. His nose pressed against it, tail, stiff ears pricked with intent. A low huff escaped him, more urgent than curious. Jeff tightened his grip on the man. "What's in the bag?" The suspect smirked, lips curling though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Junk. Nothing worth your time." Jeff ignored the words, dragging the bag into the open. It was damp, the zipper half broken, but heavy with contents. He knelt, tugged it open, and froze. Inside lay scraps of clothing, a stained towel and a small bracelet glinting faintly in the beam of his light. Delicate silver letters spelled out a name, Alyssa. Lisa gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. "Dad, it's hers." Jeff's throat closed, the weight of the evidence sinking into him like stone. The bracelet was too personal, too unique to be coincidence. He lifted it carefully, slipping it into an evidence bag, his gloves trembling slightly. Liam pressed closer, nose-brushing the bag, then the bracelet itself as though confirming what his instincts already knew. His amber eyes lifted to Jeff's, steady, unwavering. And then Jeff saw it. Something more than chance. The way the shepherd lingered on that piece, the way his body relaxed, as though finding something familiar. A memory surfaced in Jeff's mind. Lisa's words at the garage, soft but insistent. He knows her. Jeff straightened his voice low, almost reverent. He was with her. Lisa blinked, confusion and awe blending. "What do you mean?" Jeff glanced at Liam, who stood tall despite the storm's echoing growl above. These scars, this training, his reactions. It's all too precise. He wasn't abandoned. He was part of her world before she vanished. Maybe her protector. Maybe forced away from her when she was taken. Lisa knelt, wrapping her arms around the dog's neck. Liam leaned into her, his body warm, steady, as though carrying both comfort and burden. Jeff looked back at the suspect, who tried to mask his unease with a sneer. "Where did you get this bracelet?" Jeff's voice cut sharp. The man shrugged, his cuffs rattling. Picked it up. She dropped it. Jeff slammed him harder against the wall, his patience stripped thin. "You don't just pick up something like this. You were with her." The suspect gritted his teeth, refusing another word. Jeff pulled the duffel shut, sealing it as evidence. His mind raced, connecting strands he could no longer ignore. Alyssa's scarf. Now the bracelet. And Liam. Always leading them closer. The storm's roar outside deepened thunder, rattling the very walls. Lisa pressed closer to Liam, whispering, "You found her once. You'll find her again." Jeff turned, the weight of decision pressing on him. For the first time in years, he let himself believe in something beyond duty. Something threaded through scars, amber eyes, and a girl's missing name. He pocketed the evidence bag, meeting his daughter's gaze. "This dog isn't just here by accident. He's the bridge between us and Alyssa." Liam exhaled a sound almost like a sigh, then settled at Lisa's side, his eyes fixed on the storm-darkened door. And in that moment, Jeff realized the case had shifted again. Liam wasn't just a witness. He was part of the story itself. The storm broke deep into the night, its fury thinning into steady rain. Windcliff's streets were empty pools of water glimmering beneath the faint glow of lamps. Jeff pulled into his driveway, the cruiser's engine ticking as it cooled. Inside the garage, the air was warmer, humming with the heater's low thrum. Lisa curled beneath a blanket on the old couch Jeff had dragged from storage, her head resting on a pillow. Her breathing was soft, steady, her exhaustion finally pulling her into sleep. At her feet, Liam lay stretched across the floor, his body angled toward the door as if guarding the threshold. His ears flicked at every sound, his amber eyes never fully closing. Jeff stood at the doorway for a long while, watching. The sight was quiet but powerful. His daughter sleeping for the first time in days, without fear. And the dog keeping watch, as though the role had always been his. Rain tapped against the tin roof, the rhythm steady almost like a whisper. Jeff's chest tightened. He could almost hear his late wife's voice in the quiet. Gentle, certain, reminding him that protection could come in unexpected forms. He moved closer, crouching near Liam. The shepherd lifted his head, their eyes locking. In those amber depths, Jeff saw something that unsettled him. Not just intelligence, but connection. This was more than instinct. Liam seemed to understand the weight of what they carried. "You're not just a dog," Jeff murmured. You're part of this thread. You've walked with her. You've carried pieces of Alyssa's story back to us." Liam blinked slowly, lowering his head back onto his paws, but his gaze stayed on Jeff, unwavering. Jeff leaned back against the wall, exhaustion pulling at him. He rubbed his temples, his mind replaying the night. The suspect's knife, the bracelet, the storm that nearly swallowed them whole. Yet through it all, Liam had been there, bridging gaps no file or report could. Across the room, Lisa stirred, murmuring in her sleep. Her hand slipped from the blanket, brushing against Liam's fur. The shepherd shifted closer, letting her fingers rest against his side. A soft sigh escaped her lips, and Jeff's heart clenched at the simple image. For months, grief had hollowed her. Tonight with Liam, something had begun to mend. Jeff whispered into the quiet, half to himself, half to the storm. "Maybe you're the bridge we didn't know we needed." The garage settled into silence, broken only by the steady hum of the heater. Jeff's eyes grew heavy, but his hand never strayed far from the evidence bag on the table, the bracelet gleaming faintly through plastic. Proof that Alyssa was still tied to this world. Proof that Liam carried part of her story. At some hour before dawn, Jeff dozed in the chair by the door. His sleep was restless, full of flashes. The glint of a knife, Alyssa's name carved in silver, his daughter slipping on the dock. Through it all, one constant remained: amber eyes, burning steady against the dark. When he stirred awake, Liam was still in position, head lifted, ears pricked at the faintest sounds outside. Jeff felt a strange reassurance settle in him. This dog wasn't here by chance. He was here for purpose. And as Jeff rose, the radio crackled once more. Static bending into clipped words about movement near the old station, the one long abandoned at the edge of town. Jeff met Liam's gaze again. The shepherd was already on his feet, body tense, eyes fixed as if he had been waiting for this moment. Jeff's voice came quiet but certain. "Show me where she is." The old police station crouched at the edge of Windcliff like a relic of another age. Its bricks were darkened by decades of salt air. Its windows boarded over the front steps, cracked and leaning. Once it had held cells, evidence rooms, and a squad that kept the harbor streets alive. Now it was a husk rattling in the storm. Jeff parked the cruiser a block away, headlights off. Lisa remained bundled in the passenger seat, her eyes wide but unyielding. "Please," she whispered, "be careful." Jeff brushed her hand, then looked to the back. Liam was already braced, body taut, amber eyes fixed on the looming station. Rain sheeted across his coat as he leapt out, landing silent as a shadow. "Lead," Jeff said. The shepherd didn't hesitate. He pulled toward the side of the building, past broken windows and rusted doors, nose working in sharp bursts. His paws splashed through puddles until he stopped at a half-collapsed stairwell leading down beneath the main floor. Jeff swept his light across it. The concrete was cracked, weeds pushing through, but the air rising from below was colder, heavier. Liam nosed the gap, then slipped inside without looking back. Jeff followed his boots, grinding against wet steps. The beam of his flashlight revealed graffiti peeling off damp walls, pipes sweating beads of water that dropped with hollow echoes. The deeper they went, the tighter the air became, as if the place itself resisted intruders. At the bottom, a corridor stretched forward, long and narrow, lined with rusted doors. Liam moved low each step, careful ears flicking with sharp intent. Twice he paused, sniffing at locks before pushing farther. Finally, he stopped at a heavy iron door, his body's stiff tail locked straight. A growl rolled from his chest, deep, deliberate. Jeff stepped forward, light steady. The door was chained from the outside padlock, freshly scarred by force. He pulled bolt cutters from his belt, the same ones used at the warehouse. One hard snap, and the chain fell clattering across the floor. He pulled the door open. The hinges screamed. The beam of his flashlight swept into the small room beyond. At first only shadows, old crates, and the sour smell of mold. Then movement. A figure curled in the corner, arms wrapped tight around knees. Blonde hair matted to her face, clothes damp and torn lips cracked from thirst. Her eyes squeezed shut against the light. Jeff's chest clenched. "Alyssa," he whispered. The girl flinched, weak, her voice no stronger than a rasp. "Please, don't." Jeff holstered his weapon and lowered himself, palms open. "You're safe. My name is Jeff Turner. I'm with the sheriff's department." Liam stepped forward, nose brushing the floor, then stopped just shy of her. His tail gave a single sweep, slow and steady. The girl lifted her head at the sound. Her gaze, dazed and hollow, found the shepherd. For a moment she only stared, as if unsure whether the storm and hunger had conjured him. Her lips moved, barely audible. Jeff froze. His heart hammered. The girl knew his name. Liam lowered himself to the floor, creeping closer. Ears, flat eyes soft. Alyssa's trembling hand lifted, brushing against the coarse fur of his neck. The shepherd leaned into her touch, amber eyes shining with quiet certainty. Jeff swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in his eyes. She wasn't just alive. She had been waiting for this dog. He turned toward the hallway, his voice tight. "We found her. She's alive." The storm groaned above. But inside the forgotten corridor, a different weight filled the air. Hope, fragile but real, carried in the steady breath of a dog who had never stopped searching. For a long moment, no one moved. The storm raged above water, dripping through cracks in the ceiling. But in that forgotten room, time seemed to hold its breath. Alyssa's hand remained against Liam's fur, her fingers trembling, yet clinging as though she feared he might vanish if she let go. Her lips quivered, words breaking through in fragments. They took everything. But he was there. He tried to find me. Jeff knelt beside them, his voice steady but gentle. "You're safe now. We'll get you out of here." Alyssa's hollow eyes flicked toward him, then back to the shepherd. "They locked me in. Nights were so long. But I heard him." She leaned her forehead against Liam's neck, her tears soaking into his coat, scratching at the door. He never left. Liam didn't move away. His chest rose and fell with a steady rhythm, his amber gaze locked on the girl as though guarding her even now. His scars caught the beam of Jeff's flashlight, reminders of battles fought, but tonight they looked like marks of endurance, proof that he had carried her story back into the light. Jeff swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing deep. This wasn't coincidence. Liam hadn't stumbled into their lives. He had been searching, carrying the thread that led them here. Lisa appeared at the doorway, her voice hushed with awe. "She knows him, Dad. She really knows him." Jeff's chest tightened. He placed a hand lightly on Alyssa's shoulder. "Can you stand?" She nodded weakly, though her body shook when she tried to rise. Jeff slipped his arm under hers, steadying her. Liam moved in step, pressing close, his body acting as support. Alyssa leaned into both of them, her strength nearly gone, but her spirit clinging to the one constant that hadn't abandoned her. They stepped into the corridor. The storm's roar filtered down like distant thunder, but Alyssa's whispered words carried louder. "I thought he was gone. I thought they took him too." Her voice cracked, but she smiled faintly through exhaustion. "He found me." Jeff's throat burned. He didn't correct her, didn't break the fragile truth. In that moment, Liam was more than a dog. He was proof of loyalty that no cage, no storm, no cruelty could erase. When they reached the stairwell, Jeff keyed his radio, his voice sharp with urgency. "Unit 3, we have the girl. Alive. Request immediate medical response." Static answered first, then a voice breaking through. "Copy, Unit 3. Ambulance en route. Lisa hurried ahead, her small frame pushing open the rusted door to the outside. Wind blasted through the storm, still wild but thinning. Street lamps flickered, painting the rain in streaks of gold. For the first time, Alyssa blinked into the open air, her chest rising with a shuddering breath of freedom. Liam stood at her side, tail sweeping once, as though marking the moment. Alyssa's hand tightened in his fur, her whisper carried away by the wind. "You never left me." Jeff helped her down the steps, his jacket shielding her frail body. At the bottom, the ambulance's lights broke through the mist, cutting across the dark like a promise. Officers rushed forward, their boots splashing in the flooded street, their faces stunned at the sight of the missing girl alive. But Alyssa's gaze never left Liam. Even as medics lifted her gently onto a stretcher, her hand stretched back until her fingers brushed his muzzle. He pressed his nose against her palm, a silent vow renewed. The storm still lashed Windcliff, but in that fragile moment beneath the glow of ambulance lights, a different kind of light broke through. The light of reunion, of loyalty, proven of hope, carried out of shadows by a scarred shepherd who refused to let go. The storm broke at dawn, leaving Windcliff washed clean, its streets shimmering with puddles that reflected pale light. Outside, Pineford general reporters clustered near the entrance, their cameras poised. Word had spread quickly. After days of searching, Alyssa Grant had been found alive. And at the center of the story was the scarred German shepherd no one had claimed. Inside, the hospital's hall smelled of antiseptic and damp clothes hung to dry. Jeff stood near the door of room 204, watching through the glass. On the bed, Alyssa lay propped up by pillows, her face pale but eyes clear. Her aunt's shoulders, trembling with relief, held her hand. Lisa hovered nearby, clutching a styrofoam cup of cocoa, but her gaze stayed on Liam, who lay at the foot of the bed. The shepherd's head rested on his paws, his body angled toward Alyssa, as though he had guarded her through every hour of captivity and wasn't about to stop now. The girl's voice, hoarse but sure, carried through the door. "They tried to break me," she whispered to her aunt. "But he was there. Even when I couldn't see him, I felt him. He never left." Her aunt nodded, tears shining in her eyes. Doctors came and went, checking vitals, speaking in low tones. Yet every time a hand touched Alyssa's arm, Liam's eyes followed, steady and watchful. No one dared to move him. He had earned his place. By midday, news had reached every corner of the town. People stopped Jeff on his way to the cafeteria. Neighbors, fishermen, even shopkeepers he barely knew. Each spoke of the same thing, their voices, a mix of awe and gratitude. That stray. They say he saved her. God sent that dog. What's his name? Jeff offered no embellishment, only the truth. His name is Liam. By afternoon, the waiting room was full. Teachers from Alyssa's school brought flowers. Friends left cards. Officers from the department stopped in, their expressions softened by something beyond duty. One leaned close to Jeff. "The town hasn't had good news in years. You gave them a miracle." Jeff shook his head. His gaze drifted back to the shepherd stretched beside Alyssa's bed. "Not me. Him." That evening, Alyssa's parents arrived from out of town, their faces drawn from sleepless nights. The moment they entered the room, Alyssa reached weakly for them, her cry breaking into sobs. They folded her into their arms, tears falling freely. Liam lifted his head, ears pricked. Alyssa stretched one hand back until her fingers brushed his fur. Her father met Jeff's eyes, his voice rough with gratitude. "Thank you for bringing her back, and for him." Jeff inclined his head, the words sticking in his throat. Outside, the town gathered. The story had already taken root, whispers becoming headlines. A stray shepherd found in the rain, the same dog who uncovered clues, shielded a child, and led an officer to the missing girl. By nightfall, people stood outside the hospital with candles, their voices carrying a single refrain, the dog who saved Alyssa. Jeff returned to the room to find Lisa curled in a chair, her head resting near Liam's back. Alyssa slept, her hand still tangled in the shepherd's coat. For the first time in months, Jeff let himself breathe deeply. The storm was over, but something new had begun. Something that would not fade when the headlines did. The station's roll call room had never felt so full. Afternoon light spilled through narrow windows, falling across desks, pushed aside to make space. Officers stood shoulder to shoulder, their uniforms damp from the drizzle outside. On the wall, someone had taped a banner in simple black letters. "Welcome home, Alyssa." "Thank you, Liam." Jeff shifted on his feet at the front of the room, his patrol jacket buttoned, his hands clasped behind his back. Lisa stood beside him, her cheeks pink with excitement. At her feet, Liam lay still but alert, his ears twitching at every sound. The sheriff cleared his throat. "We gather not just to celebrate a case closed, but to honor those who made it possible. Deputy Turner, your work brought Alyssa home, and as for this shepherd..." He looked down at Liam, a smile breaking his stern expression. "Some call him a stray, but today he's something else." The clerk stepped forward, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. Jeff signed his name, his pen steady despite the knot in his chest. The final line read simply, "Adoption complete." A ripple of applause moved through the room. Lisa clapped hardest of all, then crouched beside Liam with something in her hands. It was a leather collar, dark brown, the brass tag engraved with a single word, Liam. She fastened it carefully around his neck, her voice soft but sure. "Now you're ours. Now you belong." Liam tilted his head-tail, sweeping the floor once, twice. Then he leaned forward, licking her cheek. Lisa laughed, a sound Jeff hadn't heard in months, bright and unguarded. Jeff's throat tightened. He looked around at the officers, the banner, the room that once felt only like duty. For years he had walked its halls, with walls around his heart, burying his grief beneath protocol. But today, standing beside his daughter and the dog who had saved them both, those walls cracked open. When the applause faded, the sheriff placed a hand on Jeff's shoulder. "You've been through loss. We all knew it. But this..." He glanced at Lisa and Liam. "This is what healing looks like." Jeff nodded, unable to speak. His gaze drifted to Lisa, who knelt with her arms around Liam's neck, her face pressed into his fur. The image seared into him, his daughter smiling. Her grief softened her heart, tethered once more to something steady. Later, as the room cleared, Lisa skipped ahead down the hall, her hand resting lightly on Liam's back. Jeff followed his steps, slower but lighter than they had been in years. Outside, the drizzle had stopped, the air carrying the scent of salt and pine. The town was waiting. Neighbors clustered at the steps, their faces full of curiosity and gratitude. Someone called out, "Is that the hero dog?" Another voice, "That's the one who saved her." Jeff didn't flinch at the attention. For the first time, he let it pass over him. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about a scarred shepherd with amber eyes and a girl who refused to let him go. Lisa raised her chin proudly. "His name is Liam," she told the crowd, her hand still resting on the collar. "And he's ours." Applause swelled louder than the storm that had shaken the town days before. Jeff stood back, watching his daughter beam, watching Liam hold his ground, as though born for this moment. And for the first time since his wife's passing, Jeff felt something deep and unfamiliar return peace. The day ended in color. The storm that had once drowned Windcliff now left the sky streaked in gold and rose, the sun setting low across the horizon. The sea breathed gently, its waves rolling in slow arcs, each one breaking with a sigh that seemed to carry relief. Jeff walked along the damp sand, his shoes sinking with every step. Beside him, Lisa darted ahead, her hair catching the wind, laughter ringing out bright and unrestrained. Liam chased after her, bounding through shallow water, his paws splashing arcs of light into the air. Jeff paused, letting the sound reach him. It had been months, no years, since such laughter had filled his world. It spread through him like warmth after winter, thawing places he thought had gone cold forever. He lifted his eyes to the horizon. The sky burned brighter as the sun touched the water's edge, a canvas of orange, fading into violet. For the first time in a long while, Jeff let his shoulders drop, the weight of grief and duty easing, as though the tide itself had carried it away. Ahead, Lisa fell into the sand, giggling as Liam nudged her with his nose, then dropped a piece of driftwood at her feet. She lifted it high, calling, "Go, Liam!" The shepherd burst forward, a streak of muscle and joy, chasing the stick with the determination of a pup, his scars hidden in the glow of sunset. Lisa clapped, her laughter sharper than the gull's cries overhead. She turned back to Jeff, cheeks flushed, eyes alive. "Look, Dad, he's happy." Jeff smiled. An easy, unguarded smile that surprised even him. He stepped closer, watching as Liam trotted back with the stick tail high, eyes gleaming. Lisa threw it again, her laughter carrying across the sand, mixing with the rhythm of waves. The scene felt simple, yet it carried more weight than any case file, any courtroom, any headline. Here was his daughter alive with joy again. Here was a dog who had been written off as nothing more than a stray, now the center of their small, healing family. And here was Jeff, no longer a man bound only by grief, but one who could breathe, who could believe in second chances. He sat on a driftwood log, his eyes never leaving them. Lisa's laughter, Liam's bounding steps, the sea's endless pulse. It was enough. As the last light softened into dusk, Lisa ran back, slipping her hand into Jeff's. Liam followed, shaking droplets from his coat before sitting squarely at their side. Together they watched the horizon, quiet, settling around them like a blessing. Jeff let the moment etch itself into memory. Not the storm, not the fear, not the knife or the scars, but this, his daughter's hand warm in his, the dog's steady breath at their side, and the sea stretching wide with promise. His voice came low, almost carried away by the waves. Miracles don't come with thunder or lightning. He glanced down at Liam, who lifted his amber eyes to meet his. They come in the loyal gaze of a forgotten dog. Lisa leaned against him, her smile soft but sure. Liam rested his head on Jeff's boot, his body still, his eyes steady as the tide. And for the first time since the world had broken, Jeff Turner believed in tomorrow. Every story has its heart, and in this one, it beats through the loyalty of a scarred German shepherd. Liam's journey was not only about helping Jeff and Lisa find Alyssa, but also about reminding all of us that animals are not possessions to be discarded. They are companions, guardians, and silent healers. German shepherds in particular carry a reputation that goes far beyond strength. They are intelligent, loyal, and resilient, capable of standing firm in storms that break most people. Yet what makes them extraordinary is not their training or their power, but the quiet devotion they give freely to those who choose to see them as family. This story asks us to pause and recognize that devotion. A dog once left in the rain became the bridge that restored a daughter's laughter, gave a grieving father a reason to hope, and led a lost girl back into the light. It shows us that even in the darkest corners, kindness has a way of finding its path. Sometimes on four legs, with amber eyes and a steady gaze. Liam's scars tell a story of survival, but his presence tells a greater truth, that love once given never really disappears. It waits, it guards, and it returns at the moment we need it most. As we step back from this tale, the message is simple, but powerful. Care for the animals around you. Protect them as they have protected us for centuries. In doing so, we not only honor their loyalty, but also remind ourselves of the humanity we are capable of. Because miracles rarely arrive with thunder. They arrive quietly in the faithful eyes of a dog who refuses to give up.